already. Today we're diving into the wild and wonderful story of Gideon, from hiding in a wine press to leading a 300-man miracle army. Grab your Bibles and let's get into Judges chapter 6 through 8. Well, remember, whenever we get started, we always start with vocabulary because sometimes why those words mean something different today, or maybe we just don't use them anymore. So let's see what words we need to know for this lesson. Our first word is abundance. Abundance. Why abundance? That means a large quantity, plenty of something. What about accuse? Accuse. Why accuse? That means to blame someone for doing something wrong, to charge them with a fault, and sometimes even with a crime. Altar. Altar. Why, an altar was a special place of sacrifice for worship. In Bible times, it could be a simple bronze table, but its purpose was always sacred. Burnt offerings were made on the altar to honor God and to seek forgiveness or to give thanks. How about Baal or Baal? Why, Baal was the main false god worshipped by many of the Canaanite peoples. He was often associated with fertilities, storms, agriculture. But for the Israelites, worshiping Baal was dangerous. Why, it was a dangerous temptation because it pulled their hearts away from the one true God. Time and time again, the prophets warned against turning to Baal, reminding God's people to stay faithful. So when we see that name, we remember the importance of loyalty to the Lord. Briar. Briar. Well, a briar, it's a kind of plant, like a rose or a blackberry. It has a woody stem and it's covered with thorns or prickles. Briar. Cloak. Cloak. Why, a cloak is a long, loose outer garment, kind of like a robe or a big shawl. People wore cloaks to keep warm or to protect themselves from wind and dust, and sometimes even to just show their status. Cloak. Comrade. Comrade. Why, a comrade is a close friend, an associate, or a companion. Someone you share life with, especially during hard times or important work. Concubine. Concubine. Well, in Bible times, a concubine was a woman, often a servant, who lived with a man and was treated much like a wife, though she didn't have the same status. Many concubines helped care for the household, and their children were considered to be part of the family and could share in the inheritance. That's a concubine. Contend. Contend. Oh, well, contend means to compete, whether in a contest or a rivalry, or even as you face difficulties. Contend. Devour. Oh, to devour means to eat something up greedily or hungrily, like when someone hasn't eaten all day and they gobble up their supper. But it can also mean to use something up or to destroy it, almost as if it was being eaten up. Ephah. Ephah. Well, an ephah is a Hebrew unit of measure, dry measure, used in Bible times to measure things like grain and flour. It's equal to a little over a bushel, which is about 6 gallons. So when we see the word in Scripture, we're reading about a very generous portion. That's ephah. How about ephod? With a D at the end. An ephod. Why, an ephod was a special item of clothing, much like a tunic. It was worn by the high priest when performing his sacred duties. It wasn't just a garment, it was beautifully crafted and decorated with gold, fine linen, and other precious material. The ephod held great significance, especially because it carried the breastpiece with the 12 stones representing the 12 tribes of Israel. Why, if you want to see all the details, you can read about the ephod in Exodus chapters 28 and 39. So when we see that word ephod, we're reminded of the holiness and the care involved in worshiping God. Flail. Flail. We don't use that anymore. Oh, well, to flail means to move, swing, strike, or beat, often in a wildly uncontrollable way. You might see someone flail their arms when they're startled or trying to keep balance. In Bible times, a flail was a tool used to beat grain during harvest. So when we see that word, we think of motion and effort, and sometimes even struggles. Fleece. Well, a fleece is a coat of wool that covers a wool-bearing animal, like a sheep. It's often thick and keeps the animal warm. In Bible times, a fleece was sheared and used to make clothing and blankets. Fleece. Forsaken. Forsaken. To forsake someone means to give up on them, to abandon, or to leave them alone. It's a heavy word, often filled with sorrow. Glean. To glean means to gather grain or other produce that's been left behind by the reapers, the ones who harvest the fields. Glean. Harvest. Do you know harvest? Why, the harvest is the season when the crops are gathered from the fields. After all the planting and growing, it's time to collect the fruits or vegetables of their labor. Host. Host. Oh, a host means a great number. Why, a multitude. It can describe a crowd of people or even an army. Multitude. Oppress. Oppress. Why, oppress, that means to crush or to burden someone, especially through abuse of power or authority. It's when someone in control uses their position to make life hard for others, often unfairly. Oppress. Proclaim. Proclaim. Why? To proclaim means to announce something publicly, to declare it formally and with a purpose. Proclaim. What about produce? Well, produce refers to anything that's grown, like fruits, vegetables, grain, the things you eat. It's the harvest from the earth, the good things that come from planting and tending to your gardens. Provision. Provision. Why, that sounds like provide. Provision means a stock of materials or supplies like food, water, or anything that's needed for daily life. Provision. Resemble. Resemble. Well, it simply means to be like or similar to something or someone. You might say the child resembles their parent. They may have similar eyes or smiles. Resemble. Retain. Oh, to retain means to keep something in your possession or to continue using it. It's about holding on. Snare. Oh, a snare is something that entangles or traps or deceives. In Bible times, it could be a physical trap to catch animals, but spiritually, a snare could be anything that lures you away from God, like a temptation or a false teaching or even pride. Steadfast. Steadfast. To be steadfast means to be firm in your belief, your determination on your loyalty. It's about sticking with something, specifically and especially your faith, no matter what comes your way. Steadfast. Stronghold. Stronghold, why? A stronghold's a fortified place, like a fortress built for protection and safety. In ancient times, people would run to a stronghold when an enemy came near. Stronghold. Subdue. Subdue. That means to overcome something, often in battle or to bring it under control. In the Bible, you'll see this word when God's people take possession of a land or when someone brings their enemies or even their own desires into obedience. It's about gaining control, not with just strength, but sometimes with the discipline and purpose. Subdue. Subside. Oh, well, subside means to become quiet or less, to settle down after something has been loud or strong or intense. Think of a storm that rages and then slowly calms, or emotions that cool after a heated moment. That's subside. Sustenance. Why, sustenance means the supplying of necessities of life, like food, water, shelter. It keeps us going day by day. Sustenance. Threshing floor. Oh, we don't use that one anymore, do we? A threshing floor is a ground or flat space used for threshing. Why, that means to separating the seed from the harvested plant. In Bible times, farmers would spread out their grain and tread or beat it with the to loosen the kernels, and then it was a place of very hard work but also blessing because they gained the kernels from the grain. Hoard. Hoard. Why, hoard is a word that's used to describe when someone turns away from God to pursue something unworthy, debasing, unseeming, or false. It's a strong word meant to show the seriousness of spiritual unfaithfulness, like chasing after idols or worldly desires instead of relying on the one true Lord. Hoard. Fear often prevents us from achieving our potential. The Midianites had browbeaten the Israelites until they were broken in spirit and completely lacking in confidence. Among their number was a young man who was intimidated by the Midianites until God started working on him. Slowly, God nudges and encourages him to look beyond his current view to see what he can do to free God's people from their daily misery and suffering. God has chosen Gideon to liberate the nation of Israel. Oh, but first he must convince him that he is the man for the job. Well, let's review a few of our chapter rhymes from the book of Judges. Israel continues, their work was not done. More conquest in Judges, chapter 1. A generation who served Baals now grew, but leaders are raised in Judges 2. Ehud thrust a sword into Eglon's belly. Such a great story in Judges 3. To drive a tent peg must have been a chore, but that's what Jael did in Judges 4. Deborah and Barak sing a happy jive, celebrating the Lord and Jael in Judges 5. Most scholars place the period of Judges between 1450 BC and 1000 BC. The precise dates are still debated over. Gideon appears in Israel history about 40 years after Deborah and Barak. Gideon lived near Ophrah, which is in the territory of Manasseh. The Gideonites gathered in the valley of Jezreel. Who are we going to meet in chapter 6? Well, the Midianites, that's the bad guys with the sword. They oppressed the Israelites for 7 years. Well, there's also the angel of the Lord. Why, God himself as a theophany appeared to Gideon, seemingly in the form of a man or an angel. Judges chapter 6 verse 14 makes it clear that the angel of the Lord was God. And of course we're going to meet Gideon. He's the 5th judge of Israel. God used him to free Israel from the oppression of the Midianites. He was given the name Jerubbaal, which means let Baal contend against him. So open your Bibles now to chapter 6 in the book of Judges. Make sure we know where that is. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges. And we're going to be in chapter 6. Fear often prevents us from reaching our potential, but oh, there's a story today. Midian oppresses Israel. The people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Oh, not again. And the Lord gave them into the hand of Midian 7 years. And the hand of Midian oppressed Israel. And because of Midian, the people of Israel made for themselves the dens that are in the mountains and the caves and the strongholds. For whenever the Israelites planted crops, the Midianites and the Amalekites and the people of the east would come up against them. They would encamp against them and devour the produce of the land. Take it all as far as Gaza and leave no sustenance, no food in Israel. No sheep or ox or donkey, for they would come up with their livestock and their tents. They would come up like locusts in number. Both they and their camels could not be counted, so they had laid to waste the land as they came in. Oh, this next period of oppression here comes at the hands of the Midianites, forcing Israel to hide out in caves and dens. The Midianites, along with the Amalekites, were so numerous and have so many men and herds that whenever Israel harvested any crops, they came up and pillaged it. Oh, the ravaging was so complete that all the Israelites can do is head for the caves and mountains and retreat for refuge. Food has become so scarce, if Israel had to drive out all of the inhabitants as God had instructed, there would not be these people eating all their crops. The Midianites were descendants of Keturah, Abraham's second wife. Midian was one of her 5 sons. When Abraham made provisions for his heirs, he gave gifts to Midian and sent him to his brothers to the east to separate them from the sons of God, as he had promised to bless Isaac. And Israel was brought very low because of Midian, and the people of Israel cried out for help to the Lord. When the people of Israel cried out to the Lord on account of the Midianites, the Lord sent a prophet to the people of Israel, and he said to them, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel." Oh, that was in yellow, but notice now he's going to quote God, so it's in red. "I led you up from Egypt and brought you out of the house of slavery, and I delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians and from the hand of all who oppressed you, and drove them out before you and gave you their land. And I said to you, I am the Lord your God. You shall not fear the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell." So God sent a prophet in response to Israel's cries of destitution, who reminded them how God had worked past miracles on their behalf. He said that Israel had ignored the Lord's request not to worship the gods of the land and refused to listen when he spoke to them. Oh, they had not obeyed my voice. Verse 11 is the call of Gideon. Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abzerite, while his son Gideon was beating out the wheat in the winepress, to hide from the Midianites. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor." This message to Israel came through a prophet. The message to Gideon, though, came from the angel of the Lord. And we will see in verse 14 that this isn't just an angel of the Lord, but this is the Lord himself. What dignified task was Gideon doing when the angel of the Lord appeared? He was hiding in a winepress, pounding out wheat. Mighty man of valor. Verse 13. And Gideon said to him, "Please, sir, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all his wonderful deeds that our fathers recounted to us?" Oh, he knows those stories. Saying, "Did not the Lord bring us from Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hand of Midian." Gideon doesn't beat around the bush. He just blurts out the most difficult question, the question that everybody wants to know. Why? Why has God allowed this to happen to him? Gideon is aware of the times when God intervened and in the past, and he concludes that God just no longer cares. God will need to give Gideon a boost because of the insecurities he feels over his origin and background. Gideon is the youngest son of Joash, the clan of Abiezer, the tribe of Manasseh. No matter. God's stamp of approval ought to be enough for anyone. God assures Gideon that the Midianites will be dealt with in one clean swoop. Why, it won't be any harder for Gideon than it would be for him to beat one man. And he said to him, Gideon, to the angel, "If I now I have found favor in your eyes, then show me a sign that it is you who speak to me. Please do not depart from here until I come to you and bring out my present that I set before you." And he said, "I will stay till you return." So Gideon went into his house and prepared a young goat and unleavened cakes from an ephah of flour. The meat he put in a basket, and the broth he put in a pot, and brought them for him under the terebinth, and presented it to him. However scarce the food is, Gideon is looking for confirmation that this whole episode is more than just a strange encounter or a dream, and that the request is backed by the Almighty God. So he gives the messenger the best he has. The angel of God said to him, "Take the meat and the unleavened cakes and put them on this rock, and then pour the broth over them." And he did so. And the angel of the Lord reached out the tip of his staff and that was in his hand and touched the meat and the unleavened cakes, and fire sprang up from the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened cakes. And then the angel of the Lord disappeared from sight. When Gideon perceived that he was an angel of the Lord, Gideon said, "Alas, O Lord my God, for now I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." The Lord gives Gideon special orders for setting out this meal on an improvised altar. The fire that consumes the food is the mark of divine acceptance, just like in the days of, Moses and Aaron at the dedication of the temple. Gideon recognizes at last that he has been speaking to God in the flesh and fears death because, he has heard that no one can look upon God and live. Oh, but the Lord said to him, "Peace be with you. Do not fear. You shall not die." Then Gideon built an altar right there to the Lord and called it, "The Lord is Peace." To this day, it still stands in Ophrah and belongs to the Abzerites. When the Lord spoke to Gideon, it gave him comfort and peace. Notice the name of the altar that Gideon built. He names, "The Lord is Peace." He knows that anyone who sees God will die. That's what they had learned. But in this case, God says, "You will not die." So he names it, "The Lord is the Lord of Peace." That night the Lord said to him, "Take your father's bull and a second bull 7 years old, and pull down the altar of Baal that your father has." Oh, his dad had an altar? "And cut down the Asherah that is beside it, and build an altar to the Lord your God on top of the stronghold here, with stones laid in due order. Then take the second bull and offer it as a burnt offering with the wood of the Asherahs you cut down." So Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord had told him. But because he was too afraid of his family, remember, it's dad's altars, and the men of the town, what might do to him, he went and did it by night. So assignment number 1 for Gideon involves putting his own house in order. Gideon's ability to follow through on this mission is essential. It'll, 1, show his countrymen exactly where he stands. And 2, prove himself that he had the gumption to stand up against evil. And 3, stand as a test case. Gideon surrounds himself with 10 of his servants and performs the task God has asked, only under the cover of darkness. Oh, Gideon destroys the altar of Baal. When the men of the town rose up in the morning, behold, the altar of Baal was broken down, and the Asherah beside it was cut down. And the second bull was offered on an altar that had been built. And they said to one another, who has done this thing? Then, after a search, they inquired. They said, Gideon, the son of Joash, has done this. The men of the town said to Joash, bring out your son that he may die, for he has broken down the altar of Baal and cut down the Asherah beside it. But Joash, Gideon's dad, said to all who stood against him, will you contend for Baal, or will you save him? Whoever contends for him shall be put to death by morning. If he is a god, let him contend for himself, because his altar has been broken down. Well, therefore, on that day, Gideon was called Jerubbaal. That is to say, let Baal contend against him, because Gideon broke down Baal's altar. So after a quick search, the townspeople discover it was Gideon who's the one that tore apart their place for idol worship. They demanded his life. Joash, Gideon's father, defends him by contending that if Baal is really a god, he can stand up for himself. He should not need mortals to defend him. The people listened to Joash's reasoning, and they call Gideon Jerubbaal. Verse 33. Now all the Midianites, the Amalekites, and the people of the east came together, and they crossed the Jordan and encamped in the valley of Jezreel. But the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon, and he sounded the trumpet, and the Abzerites were called out to follow him. And he sent messengers throughout all Manasseh, and they too were called out to follow him. And he sent messengers to Asher, Zebulun, Naphtali, and they went up to meet him. So these nomadic people all joined forces to prepare for battle. The Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon so that he's able to accomplish the purpose of God. He causes the trumpet to sound, just like Ehud, calling the Israelites to arms. The Abzerites, Gideon's clan, rally first to his side. Then Manasseh follows with Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali. The sign of the fleece. Then Gideon said to God, if you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said, behold, I'm laying a fleece, a piece of wool, at the threshing floor. If there is dew on the fleece alone, and all it's dry on the ground, then I will know you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said. And it was so. When he rose up in the morning and he squeezed the fleece, he wrung out dew from it. Why, enough to fill a bowl of water. But there was no dew on the ground around it. Then Gideon said to God, let not your anger burn against me. Let me speak just once more. Please let me test you just once more with the fleece. Please let it be dry on the fleece only, but all the ground around it let there be dew. And God did so that night, and it was dry on the fleece only, and on all the ground there was dew. Gideon pleaded for two more signs. One night he asked for that fleece to be placed on the threshing floor, be wet with dew by the following day, while the ground around it was dry. The next night he requests that the fleece remain dry while the ground becomes wet. And God does just as Gideon asked. Let's see if we've got a rhyme to remember this story. Gideon tore Baal and the Asheroth to sticks. He did it by night in Judges 6. Well, we're going to keep reading because our story continues in chapter 7. Okay? Gideon's 300 men. Then Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all the people who were with him rose early and encamped beside the springs of Harod. The camp of Midian was north of them by the hill of Moreh in the valley. And the Lord said to Gideon, see, we're in red, the people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast, saying, ooh, my hand saved me. Therefore, proclaim to the ears of the people, saying, whoever is fearful and trembling, he can return home and hurry away from Mount Gilead. And then 22 of the people returned home. Now 10,000 remained. Don't you think that would make Gideon just a little nervous? Why, Israel camped in the springs at the springs of Harod with 32,000 men, while Midian had an estimated 135,000. Why, that is an advantage for the enemy, 4-1. But the Israelite army was still too large for God's purposes. The law included provisions that allowed the faint-hearted to be sent home from military service to maintain the morale of the troops. We read that in Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 8. When given the opportunity, 2/3 of the men returned to their homes, leaving only 10,000. But Israel needs God far more than he needs them. And do you see? He didn't want Israel to say, oh, we created our victory. God is going to show them that he creates the victory for them because they're his. And the Lord said to Gideon, the people are still too many. Take them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. And anyone whom I say to you, this one shall go with you, And anyone of whom I say to you, this one shall not go with you, shall not go. So he brought the people down to the water, and the Lord said to Gideon, everyone who laps the water with his tongue, as a dog laps, you shall set by himself. Likewise, everyone who kneels down to drink. And the number of those who lapped, putting their hands to their mouth, was 300 men. But all the rest of the people who knelt to drink water, the Lord said to Gideon, with 300 men who lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hands, and let all the others go, every man to his home. So the people took provisions into their hands and their trumpets, and he sent all the rest of Israel, every man to his tent, but retained the 300 men at the camp of Midian, was below him in the valley. So when we start in verse 4, there's still too many men in God's view. And so at the springs, the Lord instructs Gideon to separate those who use their hands to lap water, like a dog, from those who kneel down to drink. Gideon keeps the 300 who lap and sends the rest of the men home. That same night, the Lord said to him, "Arise and go down to the camp, for I have given it into your hand. But if you are afraid to go down to the camp with Purah, your servant, and you shall hear what they say. And afterwards your hands shall be strengthened to go down against the camp." Then he went down with Purah his servant to the outpost of the armed men who were in the camp. And the Midianites and the Amalekites and all the people of the east lay along the valley like locusts in abundance, and their camels were without number, as the sands that is on the seashore in abundance. When Gideon came, behold, a man was telling a dream to his comrade, and he said, "Behold, I dreamed a dream, and behold, a cake of barley tumbled into the camp of Midian, and came to a tent and struck it, so that it fell and turned it upside down, so that the tent lay flat." His comrade answered, "This is no other than the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, the man of Israel. God has given into his hand Midian and all the camp." And as soon as Gideon heard the telling of the dream and its interpretation, he worshiped. See, the Lord prompts Gideon to sneak down to the valley, to the camp of the Midianites with his servants. While there, he overhears this dream and of a soldier to his friend. In his dream, a loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp, overturning and collapsing a tent. His friend replies that that dream means God has given Midian into Gideon's hand. And Gideon responds by worshiping God. And he returned to the camp of Israel and said, "Arise, the Lord has given the host of Midian, all of those thousands of people, into your hand." And he divided the 300 men into 3 companies and put trumpets in their hands of all the men and empty jars with torches inside the jars. And he said to them, "Look at me and do likewise. When I come to the outskirts of the camp, do as I do. When I blow the trumpet, I and all who are with me, then blow the trumpet. Also on every side of the camp, and shout, 'For the Lord and for Gideon.'" Gideon defeats Midian. Oh, I love the spoiler. So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came to the outskirts of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, when they had just set the watch, and they blew the trumpets and smashed the jars that were in their hands. Then the 300 companies blew the trumpets, broke the jars that were in their left hands, and the torches and in their right hands the trumpets had blown. They cried out, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." And every man stood in his place around the camp, and the army ran. They cried out as they fled. Oh, why, this strategy calls for dividing the ranks into 3 separate units, which confront the enemy from multiple sides, which is an excellent strategy. They won't know which way to go. The weapons, though, they were quite unusual, but they serve a purpose in warfare. They are there are 3 watches throughout the night, each of 4 hours each. The first beginning at 6 p.m. and Gideon chooses the time when his rivals would have sunk into the deep sleep and throws them into a frenzy. The cry Gideon tells his army to use includes the words he heard from the Midianite soldier, interpreting his buddy's dream. The man had said of the barley loaf that it represented none other than the sword of Gideon. So Gideon uses this slogan for the Israelites to shout out the commencement of the battle. The sword of the Lord and of Gideon. Panic fills the Midianites and they run. When they blew the 300 trumpets, the Lord set every man's sword against its comrade and against all the army. And the army fled as far as Bethshittah towards Zerah, and as far as the border of Abel Maholah and to Bath. The men of Israel were called out from Naphtali and from Asher and from Manasseh, and they pursued after Midian. Gideon sent messengers throughout the hill country of Ephraim, saying, "Come down against the Midianites and capture the waters against them as far as Beth Barar and also the Jordan." So all the men of Ephraim were called out, and they captured the waters as far as Beth Barar and also the Jordan. Why, panic had filled the Midianites, and they turned on each other with their swords. Those who would survive ran to the east. The 300 men have won that initial victory. But now, those who had previously been dismissed can help pursue the remaining enemy. The tribes closest pursue the enemy. Gideon asks Ephraim to seal off the escape routes any further. Oh, that's wonderful. 25. And they captured two princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. They killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb, and Zeb they killed at the winepress of Zeb. Then they pursued Midian, and they brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon across the Jordan. Two of Midian's leaders find shelter, one in a cavern of a rock, the other in a vat of a winepress. After they've been discovered and slain, the places where they have hidden take on their names. In biblical times, the head of an enemy was considered quite the trophy. Yick! Let's see if we have a rhyme for chapter 7. Gideon and just 300 strong men took over Midian in Judges 7. Well, we're going to keep going because our story continues in chapter. Well, Gideon passes through the cities of Succoth and Peniel while pursuing that Midianite army. In chapter 8, we're going to, of course, still see the Midianite army, who oppressed Israelites for 7 years. Why the kings of Midian brought an army of 120,000 soldiers into the promised land. Zebah and Zalmunna, why those are the kings of Midian. And then, of course, we've still got Gideon, who's the 5th judge of Israel. God used him to free Israel from oppression of the Midianites. He was given the name Jerubbaal, which means let Baal contend against him. Gideon defeats Zebah and Zalmunna. The men of Ephraim said to him, "What is this that you have done to us? Not to call us when you went to fight against Midian?" And they accused him fiercely. And he said to them, "What have I done now in comparison to you? Is not the gleaning of your grapes of Ephraim better than the grapes of the harvest at Abiezer? God has given into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. What have I been able to do in comparison with you?" Then their anger against him subsided when he said this. So we kind of have this break in the action while Gideon settles a dispute. The fight will quickly resume after this brief little break. See, the men of Ephraim are upset they weren't called in to fight. Gideon could have responded that he didn't need their help or that God didn't tell him to. But he chose to respond with a gentle answer. He conveys the impression that his own contributions were so small in comparison to the roles they played in eliminating leaders in previous battles. Verse 4. And Gideon came to the Jordan and crossed over, he and the 300 men who were with him. Exhausted, yet pursuing, he said to the men of Succoth, "Please give us loaves of bread for the people who follow me, for they are exhausted. I'm pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian." And the officials at Succoth said, "Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna already in your hand, that we should give you bread to your army?" Oh, Gideon's army had prepared for a surprise attack, but not the lengthy pursuit of a retreating enemy. So Gideon asked those men of Succoth for food for his exhausted men. The men of Succoth give a cold response and practically make fun of him. They taunt him about a task that has not been completed. Then Gideon said, "Well then, the Lord has given Zebah and Zalmunna, well then, when the Lord has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, I will flail your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars." Oh my! And from there he went up to Penuel and spoke with them in the same way. And the men of Penuel answered him as the men of Succoth had answered. And he said to the men of Penuel, "When I come again in peace, I will break down this tower." Gideon is insulted that the people who could easily provide him with the supplies he needed are so callous and spiteful. He threatens them with trouble, and he promises to deliver them he plans to deliver on his return. The same situation repeats itself just a few miles down the road at Penuel. Oh, the men of Penuel feel pretty confident with their big tower, as if to imply that Gideon could threaten all he wanted, but they would remain safe. Their stubbornness and arrogance will set them up for big trouble. Now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor, and their army about 15,000 men, all who were left of the army of the people of the east. For there had fallen 120,000 men who drew the sword. And Gideon went up by way of the tent dwellers east of Nobah and Jogbehah, and he attacked the army, and the army felt secure. And Zebah and Zalmunna fled, and he pursued them and captured the 2 kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna. He threw all the army into a panic. So Zebah and Zalmunna were the greatest among the Midianites. Why, they were the leaders of a despicable nation who forcibly took lands and inflicted injury and loss in every situation to all of the nations surrounding them. They needed to be brought to justice. By the time Zebah and Zalmunna reached the east, they must have thought they were home free. Their army was down to 15,000 men. having lost 120,000 in the initial battle and the chase that followed. The leaders know their army has taken a beating, but at least they outran the Israelites. But Gideon is still in pursuit. And when the Israelite army suddenly appears so far from the original attack, the Midianite armies panic. Gideon captures the Midianite rulers, Zebah and Zalmunna. Then Gideon, the son of Joash, returned from battle by the ascent of Heres, and he captured the young man of Succoth and questioned him. And he wrote down for him the elders of Succoth, 77 men. And Gideon, came to the men of Succoth and said, Behold, Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you taunted and teased me, saying, Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna already in your hands, that we should give you bread for your men who are exhausted? And he took the elders of the city, and he took the thorns of the wilderness and briars with them, and taught the men of Succoth a lesson. And he broke down that tower of Penuel and killed the men of that city. Huh! Why, on his return trip, Gideon captures a man from Succoth who gets the name of all the 77 most prominent officials of Succoth. Gideon then enters the town, presenting Zebah and Zalmunna, their little dead bodies, and carries them out his threat of vengeance against the leaders. He also pulls down that tower in Penuel and kills the men of that city. Oh, the kings aren't dead, I'm sorry. Then he said to Zebah and Zalmunna, Where are the men whom you killed at Tabor? And they answered, As you are, so were they. Every one of them resembled a son of the king. And he said, They were my brothers, the sons of my mother. As the Lord lives, if you had saved them alive, I would not kill you. So now Gideon's probably back to his hometown of Ophrah. Gideon feels the need to avenge the death of his brothers, of his sons and mother. We are not given the detail of the murders of Gideon's brothers. Zebah and Zalmunna were foreign tyrants. They would be held accountable for their actions. And because they weren't Israelites, they couldn't flee to a city of refuge. Gideon could now settle his vengeance of blood while ridding the land of these horrible, evil men. So he said to Zethar, his firstborn, Gideon's son, Rise and kill them. But the young man didn't draw his sword, for he was afraid because he was still a young man. Then Zebah and Zalmunna said, Rise yourself and fall on us, for as the man is, so is his strength. And Gideon arose and killed Zebah and Zalmunna, and he took the crescent ornaments that were around the necks of their camels. In Gideon's day, it would have been a great honor for a youth to slay such important enemy leaders. And it would have been equally disgraceful for those leaders to have died at the hand of a child. Think about it. The sword of an experienced soldier would have dealt one clean blow versus the pokes and stabs of an amateur. But the young man was afraid, so Gideon killed the Midianite leaders and then took the ornaments that marked them as kings off of their camels. Gideon's ephod. The men of Israel said to Gideon, Rule over us, you and your son and your grandson. Also, for you have saved us from the hands of Midian. And Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. The men of Israel were so grateful to Gideon that they wanted to make this military hero their king. After all, Gideon had outsmarted an army of at least 450 times his size. Showing great wisdom, Gideon turns down their proposal and reminds them that the Lord is their rightful ruler. Then Gideon said to them, "Let me make a request of you. Every one of you gives me an earring, the earrings from their spoil." For they had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites. And they answered, "We're willing to give them." And they spread out a cloak, and every man threw in it the earrings of his spoil. And the weight of the gold earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, besides the crescent ornaments and the pendants and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, and besides the collars that were around the necks of their camels. And Gideon made an ephod of it and put it in his city, in Orpha. And all Israel poured after it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. Oh, after refusing to be their king, Gideon makes a small request out of the bounty after each man's battle bounty. Each man contributes the earrings they collected, and considering the enormous wealth they had just secured, all of them willingly donated. Now, an ephod is generally part of the priest's garment and used in worship. Making the ephod was not necessarily forbidden or wrong. However, it became a distraction to Gideon and his entire family. I mean, we're talking about an object made of 1,168 pounds of gold. Their focus began to center around the wealth and the shiny things they had acquired, instead of centering on God, who had delivered these things into their hands. So Midian was subdued before the people of Israel, and they raised their heads no more. And the land had rest for 40 years in the days of Gideon. The death of Gideon. Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went and lived in his own house. Now, Gideon had 70 sons, his own offspring, for he had many wives. And his concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son, and called his name Abimelech. And Gideon, the son of Joash, died at a good old age, and was buried in the tomb of Joash his father at Orpha of the Abzerites. So Gideon basically retires as an active national figure. He could take many wives, and his concubine is mentioned here as the mother of Abimelech. Think of a pro football player that wins the Super Bowl. He brings home the giant trophy, and soon women are just flocking to him, worshiping his every move. He forgets his humble beginnings and how he got his greatness. It's a sad decline for such a promising career. As soon as Gideon died, the people of Israel turned again, and Horde chased after the Baals and made Baal-berith their god. And the people of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had delivered them from the hands of all their enemies on every side. And they did not show steadfast love to the family of Jerubbaal, that is, Gideon, in return for all the good that he had done to Israel. So immediately following Gideon's death, the Israelite nation is back into decline and decay, worshiping the Baals. It's a tragic end because Israel is back where they began. And all they have accomplished is wiping out the Midianites. They are still no closer to God. Well, God is patient with our questions and our doubts. Gideon doubts God a lot in the beginning, but God doesn't get angry with him. He answers Gideon's questions and encourages him with the truth that Gideon is a warrior, not because of himself, but because of God. God is a warrior hero, and he is with Gideon. And if God says Gideon will have victory, he'll have victory. So our rhyme for the end of 8 is Zeba and Zalmunna suffer the same fate. Gideon kills both of them in Judges 8. So I've got a few funny little cartoons from other people for chapter 6, 7, and 8. Ooh, the George Foreman altar was the envy of everyone who had to sacrifice on the go. Almighty Lord, please do the do you do. God and Gideon and the dewy fleece. Do you see how that's written in Mountain Dew text? I guess an attack by our jazz ensemble and home economics brigades does hold an element of surprise. Okay, God. Gideon here. Let's try this again. Today, if the fleece is dry and the rock is soaked and the ground is merely damp, then that means the Midianites and I cannot be friends. I think that little lamb is getting tired of Gideon taking his wool or his fleece, don't you? Well, for those in my class, our homework this week is to finish your chapter questions for Joshua chapters 23 and 24. And we're going to go ahead and keep working on those chapter headings, all of Joshua, and then the ones in Judges for chapters 1 through 8. So from hiding in fear to leading with faith, Gideon's story reminds us that God sees more in us than we often see in ourselves. Thank you for joining me, Bible Class Betty. And remember, with God, even 3 warriors and a few jars can change the whole world. See you next time. Bye-bye.